Hello, this is Hushang Amir Ahmadi, a distinguished service professor at Rutgers University and president of the American Iranian Council. In the last two videos in English, I spoke about my conceptual understanding of US-Iran relations, issues that stand between the two nations, and policies that have been applied, unfortunately in vain, to resolve the dispute. A dispute that developed 41 years ago after the Islamic Revolution in Iran. It's important to remind you all that before that date, the United States and Iran were two partners in great relationship, economically, politically, etc. That past is a witness to, testimony to the fact that the two nations can indeed live as two great partners, and we must return to that position. The question is how? As I said, past policies have not worked. Let me start by saying that one big problem in US-Iran relation is the fact that both sides are oblivious to the realities of the other side. The United States is oblivious to the realities in Iran or of Iran, and Iran is similarly oblivious to the realities in or of Iran, of the United States. This obliviousness has led both sides to become delusional toward each other. They have developed ideas that are almost completely delusional. Let me give you a few examples. The United States have for a long time have taken the position that it can bend Iran through economic or political pressure, that it can change its behavior or change its regime even. That's delusional. The history will tell you that that is delusional, that the United States cannot use maximum pressure or minimum pressure or any level of pressure to bend the Islamic Republic to submit to the American wishes, whatever that is, change behavior or whatever. The Islamic Republic has not responded to those pressures. And at time when they did actually respond to the American demand for negotiation or things of that sort, it was because Tehran wanted to prevent war. Because as I said, the United States and Iran are in a state of no war, no peace, and that serves the Islamic Republic. So anytime the United States goes toward the war, the Islamic Republic jumps to the center and brings the America back to the center as well. and vice versa. When it goes to the peace, the Islamic Republic jumps toward the war side, comes to the center, and brings the US there as well. But I explained that before. The point I have is that the fact that at times the Islamic Republic has responded to American demand for negotiation and compromise should not make the United States delusional about its pressure policy. Will not work. The only thing that will work is obviously, as I said, all the way to the war, which the Americans are not ready for it, and I explained why. So, America, the American government, has this idea that it can actually force the Islamic Republic into accepting its demands. Unfortunately, a similar delusion exists on Iran's side. Iran thinks also, and again, unfortunately, the history has also shown that it can resist America, and that resistance is good for it because it makes Iran self-sufficient. Well, it is delusional because, yes, the Islamic Republic has been able to resist American maximum pressure and has used that to achieve certain level of self-sufficiency in many areas. But that resistance and self-sufficiency, so-called, has come at an extremely expensive price to the Iranian people. To the Iranian people. Over the last 40 years, the people of Iran have lost tremendously in economic terms, in political terms, etc. Yes, resistance has worked, and the Islamic Republic has not been overthrown or did not change its behavior, but at a cost tremendously high for the Iranian people. And here is the key. What America really at times misunderstands about the impact of its maximum pressure is that it thinks the maximum pressure will go on the Islamic Republic, the government of the regime. But the actual fact is that the regime transfers that impact, that negative impact, to the people. So it's the Iranian people that have lost from the sanctions, for example, not the regime. The regime has always found a way to survive. And I think it will find ways to survive as we move forward, unless we change direction on both sides. So the first point I just wanted to make is that both the United States and Iran are not realistic about each other's domestic situation and its power to resist or force change. They are both delusional, and they don't understand that this is not the way to go forward. Unfortunately, they are locked up with this status quo again. This has become another status quo, just like no war, no peace. This is another reason for that status quo of no war, no peace. It has to change. Aside from the fact that both sides are delusional towards each other, both sides also misunderstand their national interests vis-a-vis each other. Not that they misunderstand their own national interests, but their national interest in relation to the national interest of the other side. Unfortunately, both sides think in terms of zero-sum game. They have developed this idea that my gain should be your loss and vice versa. Again, the fact that you make the other side lose, believe me, doesn't make you win. The world has changed. This is not the world of zero-sum game again. Economies are too integrated. The world is a small place, global or local. Everything impacts everything else. So I think it is extremely important for both sides to understand that no side can maximize its national interest against the national interest of the other side. They both have to understand that their interest is maximized exactly when they both win. That there is no loser. They both win. That's when both sides will maximize their interest. Another issue that is problematic in this relationship is that neither Americans nor Iranians really know much about the people in either side. They are too focused on governments. They are too focused on regimes, so-called. Tehran is focused on Washington and Washington on Tehran. What they are losing is the people here. I know the Trump administration, the previous administrations of the US have always talked about the Iranian people, that they are in their side and that there need to be democracy, this and that. But then again, that's really just empty talk. That's empty talk. If you don't believe me, talk to the Iranian people. They will tell you that they think that America doesn't have their interests in mind. All that America has in its mind is animosity toward the Islamic Republic. And then the America just assumes that animosity toward the Islamic Republic means or equates or is equal to having the Iranian people's interest in mind. Not so. Not always so. On the Iran side too, they really don't understand the American way of life and system. In Iran, they are used to a cleavage between, a gap between the people and the government. Historically, that's been the case because the governments have been dictatorial, not representing the people, and there has always been some level of animosity between people of Iran and the government of Iran. But that is not the case in the United States. So Iranian government takes the situation in Iran in this particular respect and apply that to the United States. And they just assume that there is also a cleavage, a gap between the people and the government of the United States. Yes, there are party politics. There are people who just don't like Trump, or people don't like Joe Biden or whoever else. But then at the end of the day, Americans and the American government and American people are in the same side, particularly when it comes to foreign relations. They are the same. There is no such a cleavage between the American people and American government that exists between the Iranian people and the Iranian government. Unfortunately, from the US side, that understanding is right, that there is that cleavage, except that they just simply assume that animosity with the government means friendship with the people. Not true. That's where the problem comes. In Iran side, they just assume that we are not fighting the American people. We are fighting, or we are being inimical toward the government. Again, not true. That when you are inimical toward the government of the United States, whether you like it or not, you also bother the American people. You make them also into enemies, or at least you don't make them into friends. There is another problem in U.S.-Iran relations, and this is extremely important. America, when it sees the Islamic Republic, unfortunately, it largely sees the Islamic Republic from the eyes of its opposition, particularly opposition outside. That is to say, they see what the Iranian Americans in Los Angeles or New York or Washington or perhaps even in London and elsewhere are talking about the Islamic Republic. They just simply assume that that's the way things are back in Iran. That back in Iran too, a similar situation exists for the Islamic Republic vis-a-vis its opposition. Again, not true. After all, many in the opposition to the Islamic Republic outside the country have not been in that country for about 40 years. Many of the leaders of the opposition to the Islamic Republic that live in this country, for example, and they spoke, and they go all the time to the White House or to foreign ministry, that is the State Department, they have not themselves seen that country for 40 years. They have no idea what that country is all about. And yet they are advisors to the leaders of the America for Iran. What a disaster. That someone who has not seen the country for 40 years becomes an advisor to our leaders in this country. That's a fact. It happens all the time. It's right there for everybody to see. Unfortunately, from Iran's side, a similar situation exists. And that is a lot of anti-Americans or anti-Trump or anti-this and that, people who don't like the U.S. or this administration, talk to the Iranian leaders in the way that really miseducates them. Some of them, unfortunately, are even American policymakers who used to be policymakers, no longer. And just simply because they don't like Mr. Trump, or before Mr. Trump, those others who didn't like Obama, they would lie about this administration to Iran. They give Iran wrong ideas, wrong information, wrong advice. They mislead the government in Tehran. And again, these are journalists, policymakers, experts, think tankers, and you name it. Of course, not everybody. There are honest people there as well. But unfortunately, that's the way the two sides get educated vis-a-vis each other. So there are lots of problems. And all of this have really led to that same issue, that both sides are delusional towards each other. They have developed so many illusions that they have come to believe as facts, as realities. Both sides have to shake up. They need a whole complete new way of looking at each other, perhaps a complete paradigm shift. I talked about the paradigm shift in U.S.-Iran relations back in the first days of Obama administration when I wrote that white paper. There I said, in that white paper, I said America and Iran need a paradigm shift in ways that they look each other, they understand each other, they communicate with each other, or don't. We need that paradigm shift. I think I also wanted to point out about another issue. The American-Iranian Council has always operated on the basis of the understanding, and we believe that understanding is correct, that the common interests of the two nations far outweigh their differences. Their common interest is much more and heavier than their differences. But unfortunately, and this is the key, unfortunately, the two nations have always looked at each other from the perspective of that part of the glass that is empty, not that part that is full. They really need to change to also take a look at the full side of the glass on each side. Unfortunately, this lack of understanding that the common interests of the two countries outweigh their differences, that lack of that understanding has been a major problem in U.S.-Iran relations. Not just because they have made the differences too big and focused on the differences only, but that ignoring the common interest have cost them trillions over the last 40 years. Let me say trillions in trade and investment, in economic relations. I particularly like to focus on this as we move forward. We are going to enter into what we call a post-corona time. America, just like Iran and every other country, will have a tough time in a year. In fact, we already have that problem. Our economy is going to be declining and already have declined. Unemployment is going to be very high and so many other problems. America needs to rebuild its economy very, very quickly. That's a must. You can't play with it. You can't just theorize it. You just have to do it. The America must rebuild its economy post-corona very quickly. And I mean very quickly because there are so many dangers out there for a declining American economy at home and globally. We already see America in trouble with China. Whether the relation with China is suspended or not, the fact of the matter is that that relation is already 30% less than what it used to be. And it's going to be going down every day. Europe in post-corona will need help to rebuild. Can't help the United States. It's like after the World War II that we helped them build. But no more. We can't, just we don't have it. There are a few other countries that are becoming our rivals. India will indeed, in less than 5 years, become second to China, perhaps, in economic terms. Brazil and many other places. Latin America may not be as helpful to us as it used to be. America needs a new emerging market. It needs a new place. It needs a place where it can send investment, make trade, build relations economically. We have many countries, of course, on our side, on the American side, that is. But one country that the America doesn't have on its side is Iran. And yet Iran is perhaps the most important emerging market of the future. Every market has emerged. Iran hasn't yet. I can assure Americans that Iran has the upward of over $5 probably $1 trillion of opportunities for economic relations with the US in many ways. I mean trillion. Iran has the biggest, most educated, most skillful, and the cheapest labor market now available out there. That used to be China. That is now Iran. 80-some million people, of which half are highly educated and trained, and the wage rate is extremely low. And Iran used to be an oil economy, no more. Iran, the biggest investment in Iran now is agriculture, is tourism, is industry. Well, gas is there and oil is there as well for America to use and benefit, and have Iranian benefit as well. The United States needs Iran in post-corona time to build its economy, period. Let me repeat, America needs Iran to build its post-corona economy, period. There is very few countries in the world that could play that role for the United States. Now, I think a similar situation exists for Iran. There too, we have a country that hasn't invested in many of its economic spheres for almost 40-some years. Investment deficit in Iran is huge, tremendous, in agriculture, in tourism, in construction, in industries, in oil, in gas, you name it, in minerals. Iran is a very, very rich country. It needs all of these areas developed. But Iran is not in a position to develop its resources or utilize its resources as it hasn't been over the last 40-some years. It's just not there. Iran needs America for investment, for capital, for technology, which would be the key to development of Iran in the future. It will need trade and all kinds of economic relations. And again, Iranians have been thinking like, okay, if the United States is not open, if Europe is working with the U.S., we can use, the so-called Eastern countries, China, so on. Well, they have been doing it for some 40 years. At the end, let me tell the Iranian people and the Iranian government, after 40 years, every time, every day, every hours, you are gone down. You haven't improved. Think about it. You Iranians, you Iranian government, think about it. Yes, you did not work with the U.S. for 40 years, but during that 40 years that you did not work with the U.S. and work with China, for example, you declined. You didn't benefit. You didn't make it. And for the next 40 years, the same. You have no choice, the Iranians, to come back to the America and develop that partnership. It's only unfortunate that the two governments are standing between the two nations. They just have to understand the voice of reason. They have to listen to the voice of reason. They have to rethink their paradigm towards each other, their understandings towards each other. They must understand their needs, their national interests in relation to each other. Again, the national interests on both sides are better maximized through a win-win strategy as opposed to a game of win-lose in either side. The common interest of the United States and Iran far outweighs their differences. Just think economically, politically, etc., but economically particularly. Now, obviously, all of this could work. Both sides can really listen to this voice of reason if they could trust each other. They could better understand each other. They get better educated about each other. And the trust is key. Iran keeps telling its people, everybody else as well, that the Americans are not trustworthy. We cannot trust them. And they use some of these negotiations that they've had with the United States and haven't gone anywhere, like the JCPOA, the nuclear deal. And America also keeps complaining that Iran also doesn't deliver on its promises and that it harms us. It harms our friends and so on. On both sides, they are wrong. On both sides, they are wrong. Why they are wrong? For one thing, Iran shouldn't even think in terms of trust. There is nothing called trust in international relations. The trust is what you do. You have to do it just like the way you do with credit cards. That's how trust is built. What trust? This is not a subjective matter. The reason the JCPOA did not stand is because that deal was wrong to begin with. That's the problem. I told about it. I said about it the last time. I was against the JCPOA from the first day because it was the wrong approach to a more complex issue. That you will isolate the nuclear issue from all kinds of other problems and then hope that you will get somewhere. Of course you will not. It's just like we dispute a building 50 stories, we settle on the stories or the levels 50 and 40, 50 to 40, the top 10 floors. But what about the floor from 1 to 40 to 39. That's how the nuclear deal was. It was just the wrong way in resolving the dispute. But that's why I believe Mr. Trump now has a better formula than Mr. Obama had. The Trump's formula is comprehensive negotiation toward normalization of relationship and economic partnership. That's what I like. My hope is that Mr. Trump stays with that, because there comes a time that the Islamic Republic may not be able to resist, not to resist the US, but to resist the Iranian people. The Iranian people need to hear that statement from Mr. Trump over and over and over and over. Unfortunately, Mr. Trump has forgotten that. Mr. Pompeo has forgotten that. Mr. Brian Hook has forgotten to repeat and repeat and repeat what that President Trump said when he came out of Barjam, the JCPOA, that is. Barjam is the Persian name for the JCPOA. That the United States is ready for a comprehensive negotiation with Iran towards normalization of relations and establishment of a great economic interaction. Mr. Pompeo, Mr. Hook, please repeat what your president said. Keep saying that I want this and that. All propaganda. On Iran side, too, I think the leader of the Republic has really listened to a group of people that have taken over the country and robbing the people, stealing their properties and their monies and their banks and so on for too long. Mr. Khamenei needs to clean up the house, come up bravely to this relationship and accept this comprehensive deal. Now, as I said, they are afraid of a peace between US and Iran. As I said, they want no war, no peace. But there is always a formula for that relationship to move toward the peace side without jeopardizing the Islamic Republic's existence. After all, Mr. Trump doesn't want to change the regime. He has said it over and over. I think he should also say it over and over and over. I think the key here is to talk to the Iranian people, make them into a constituency for the US-Iran relations, so that they can put pressure on the regime for a comprehensive deal with the United States. But the way the American policymakers are going forward is not the right way. That they haven't been able to build a constituency for their position, that is a comprehensive negotiation with Iran. They have failed. Mr. Pompeo, Mr. Brian Hook, who really represents the United States in this relationship these days, they have failed to convince the Iranian people about the benefits of this relationship, that the benefits of this comprehensive negotiation that President Trump has offered. My advice to the Americans is that first, keep repeating this proposal for comprehensive negotiations toward normalization of relation and maximum economic interaction, and sell that to the Iranian people so that they become a constituency, pressuring the Republic, the Iranian regimes, to move forward. The good news here is that Tehran is changing. There is a whole new parliament and there's going to be a new government. Both of the parliament and government are going to be semi-military. By that I mean it will be that the parliament already is partly military and partly civilian, and the government that is coming into place soon will be also partly military and partly civilian. The United States should not be afraid of this two entity. I've said that in the past and continue to say that the biggest mistake the United States is making and has made is that it has made Iranian military, Revolutionary Guard, army, and others into its enemy. That was a big mistake. In fact, the United States must try to make them into its friends. I will talk about this because this is a very, very important subject in the another video. But for now, what I'm saying is the United States must be very much attentive to the fact that Tehran is changing. A whole new parliament and executive branch will soon be in place, and the United States must open to them wholeheartedly and not think about the fact that they are radicals, they are military, and that kind of stuff. Wrong. My fellow Americans, that policy will be wrong to make these new institutions into U.S. enemy. And I think I can assure Americans that if the United States was to make them into at least a neutral partner, not even a friend, the other side will respond. They are in a position to respond. And I believe Khamenei, the leader, will have no option. The situation in Iran is too dire. The economic situation is terrible. Pressure is already there. But then again, please do not think that because the economic situation is so bad, they can just, they will respond to maximum pressure if it continues. Up to a point, the pressure works. After that, it becomes a negative something. So please make sure that the pressure is maintained up to a point, and then after this parliament and this government is in place, make sure that you change course, but of course only if they change course, and I believe they will. I wanted to leave you with this positive note and continue with that later on in another video.